Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening. And today is episode 57. Thank you for being with us. And the Hopenning is a place that my lovely friend, and I created to generate hope in a life today where I think so many things is trying to take us away from a place of hope. We want to bring hope to you. And we are so blessed to have so many fantastic guests who join us on this platform to help us bring hope to you. Fran is an elementary age school teacher for the last 34 years, and she does rapid transformational therapy on the side. I'm a full-time rapid transformational therapy practitioner and a certified hypnotherapist. And we are both in Alberta, in Canada. And this is from the white north, where we bring you lots of hope. So I'll leave it to Fran to introduce our guest to you today.
Thank you, Marina, and thank you all for joining us. I am so excited to talk to Judy Granlee-Gates today. There's a reason, Judy, that I need you.
Okay, good.
Judy is a fourth-generation small business owner and multi-vocational woman. She is an award-winning custom home builder and remodeler, and she's had dozens of projects being recognized on local, state, and national level awards. So she and her company received a Pacesetter Award from Custom Home Magazine for outstanding customer experience. And the reason she's here with us today is she's an author, a very recent author of a brand new book called Bigger Living, Smaller Space, Resizing for a Clean and Cozy Home. And so Judy is a natural teacher, and it comes to her so easily to help people declutter, create a home that is stress-free because it's clutter-free. And her high-level attention to detail and her organizational skills help her guide the reader through the challenges of decluttering and what happens if you wait too long to address it. So whether you're decluttering one room or an entire home, Judy is here to help us today. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And Judy comes to us from near Seattle, Washington. And it's a pleasure to have you, Judy. So my first question to you, my home is not so cluttered. However, there are people in my life who have cluttered homes. So my number one question is, why do people have such a hard time getting rid of clutter?
That's a really loaded question, but I can answer that easily. So I think really people have a hard time creating systems. And if you don't have a system for where things go, you've heard really super organized people say everything in its place, right? And that's not always possible. We're busy, we're running around, we have children, hobbies, spouses, pets, jobs, outdoor activities, we volunteer. So we're busy, we're gone, we're home, we drop things, we leave. But I think the biggest thing is that people have clutter because they just don't know how to create a system to manage it. They don't know how to organize it. And they also have, in some cases, a really hard time of letting go of things. There are people that I see that just, I bought it, I own it, I'm going to keep it, right? So there's a couple of mindsets there, and you can look at those people a couple of ways, but I think there's a variety of reasons for the clutter and why people have it.
I can so relate to so many of that, Judy. I grew up in South Africa in the middle of apartheid, where we had people doing things for us. And my goodness, I think today still I have that lack of learning systems and putting systems in place. So that really resonates with me. And so I'm always interested in how people feel better, if you can tell us, from being in an absolute chaotic situation to learning how to put systems in place and how it changed their lives.
Yeah, I think there's so many studies. When I really started looking at the scientific aspect of clutter, I was shocked at the number of studies I came across that actually linked clutter in your home to depression, weight gain, overwhelm, illness. It was even things like asthma. I was shocked because when you have a lot of clutter, you may still have a clean home, you may clean around it, but most people aren't moving all that clutter to clean behind it or under it. And we're getting lots of indoor air pollution trapped in there, dust, pet hair, dander, all those things. And they were saying that that really contributes a lot to especially childhood asthma or allergies. And I just couldn't, I never had put the two together. And I also just think that there's a lot of people that are just depressed and they look at this clutter. You may not be clinically depressed, and I'm not a counselor or a psychologist, but they may just feel overwhelmed. But when you look at something that feels too big or feels like, how am I ever going to get through this by myself? It just sort of makes you not want to move forward, right? And so it just keeps you sort of stagnant. And so I think those are the ways that clutter can really impact people negatively and keep them kind of stuck in the clutter cycle, if you will.
Well, it seems like in the north here, there's lots of space, right?
Mhm.
So when people get too much clutter, they just get a sea can and put a sea can and fill that full.
Yeah.
Rather than really getting rid of the clutter, the sea can gets full, or the shed or the garage or the basement or the whatever. So it might not be in their face every day, but it's certainly still there that has to be dealt with. So systems, when we talk about systems, can you give us an example of a system? My clutter, I have to be honest, is paperwork.
Mine too.
Income
I'm
tax
right with
season.
you.
Now, when I solve the paper clutter thing, I will rule the world and I will call you ladies so we can rule it together, okay? I have not gotten there because I'm a tree killer. I like paper. In my business, I have a lot of paper, and paper is my number one nemesis. But I think when you talk about clutter in general in people's homes, there's a lot of types of people. And some people need to see their things to remember. For instance, my husband will put his vitamins out in a little dish at night. He keeps them in a medicine cabinet. But when he gets through his bedtime routine, he puts them out on the counter so he doesn't forget to take them before bed, right? If he doesn't see them or he doesn't follow his routine, he totally forgets to take them. Now, me, I don't like to see things on the counters. I don't like things out. And so all my stuff is behind a cabinet, and my routines are a little different. I get up in the morning and I know that the items I need are in the cabinet next to the glasses, and I open it up and everything's there. I can make my morning breakfast drink. It's all right there. I don't have to see it. It's part of my routine. So I think when people really stop and kind of look at their personality type and what they need, they often don't even realize it. There's a great book by a gal named Cassandra Arson, and it's called The Clutter Connection, I believe. And she has this test about what type of clutter bug you are. And I love her book and her theory because there's 4 types of clutter people. And you can take this little quiz and it will tell you the dominant clutter style you are. So there's 3 people in my house. I'm a ladybug, which is like, I don't want to see my stuff. I don't want any visual clutter. My husband's a cricket. He's just a typical good organizer. He likes to see his stuff while he's working on it, but then he can put it away. And then my daughter is another type. I think she's a butterfly. She has to have her stuff sitting on the counter. If her toothbrush isn't visible, she won't remember to brush her teeth. If her pills aren't out on the counter, she'll forget to take them. When you have those 3 types of people living together, then harmonizing a system becomes much, much easier. So bins and sorts of, like caddies and things can be very handy for people because they can set them out when they're using them and put them away, or they can set them out to remind themselves. But I think you have to really think about, how do I go about my day? How do I use things? And if they're not right out where I can see them, will I forget where they are? And then that can help people really kind of grow and develop a way to manage the things they need daily, which really are the things that make the most clutter, I think.
There's a whole emotional component of, because I emigrated, there are so many things like that reminds me of my childhood in a completely different continent.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with those emotional clutter, like the things that has sentimental value to people that really makes a big mess sometimes?
That's actually my favorite part of all of this, because I firmly believe that if you give something, my grandma gave me a lot of things. My husband's grandma gave us a lot of things. And I vividly remember his grandma giving us this truthfully not very attractive casserole dish that she was almost like a drill sergeant when she told us about it. You must keep this. You must use this. You must not break this. It was Grandma Coburn's. Okay. Okay. I will say I still have it. I've not gotten rid of it. I don't use it much, but I firmly believe that when you get these things from people, you either have to say no to them if they really don't mean anything to you, or if you take them, you need to figure out a way to incorporate them into your daily life. There are things in my life that I have not taken that after maybe a relative passed or something, I thought, I wish I would have taken that. My grandpa used to have a shaving mug with the brush, and he would shave, and my grandma offered it to me when he passed. And I didn't take it. And for years I thought, oh, I should have taken that. But the one thing I've learned is memories are portable. They go with me wherever I go. I have fantastic memories of shaving with my grandpa when I was a little girl. He would shave, then I would shave, pretend. And I don't need that mug to remember that. So I really tend to focus on that aspect. But the things we do keep and the things that we do have, I'm a big proponent of making sure you're using them in everyday life. I was just at someone's house and they were eating off of their grandmother's china for lunch. And that just made me smile ear to ear. And I knew that because I knew how old the dish was because of the pattern on it. And my grandma had it. And I thought, that's fantastic. They aren't just letting these sit in a cabinet and get dusty to use them once a year. They're enjoying these things that someone gifted them and, entrusted them with and using them. And so I really think people need to find a way to use the things they have, or just maybe not take them if they're offered to them.
So that's sentimental items.
Mhm.
How about like my parents who went through the Depression as kids, right? And so my mom kept every plastic bag, she would keep the bread tabs, every yogurt container,
Yeah.
so, I think I know why she would do it, but what's your take on that? Like, these older people whose houses are empty except for two little old people, and it's full of
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah. And then they just keep adding yogurt containers.
right?
My grandma and your mom would have been great friends because my grandma used to save margarine wrappers. And there was a brand of margarine in America called Imperial in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And it was in a gold foil wrapper. It had a crown on it. I can remember it vividly. And I remember going to my grandma's house as a kid and opening the refrigerator, and there was all these folded up margarine wrappers. And they would often fall out onto the floor and we'd pick them up. Gross. And I remember one time saying to her, Grandma, why do you save these? Because my mom didn't save them. And she would wrap the baked potatoes at Thanksgiving in the margarine wrappers because number one, now this is hysterical. You could laugh. Number one, they were made of foil at the time, right? So she was saving money on foil. I mean, why use a perfectly good piece of foil? And there was margarine left on them. So in her estimation, she was like not wasting those little bits of margarine, and she was not wasting the foil, which I can genuinely appreciate. She also used to run around at Christmas telling us all, don't throw the boxes away, don't throw the bows away. And she would save wrapping paper, I'm sure like maybe your mom did. And we would make her burn it at Christmas. It was like, no, it's Christmas. We're not saving the wrapping paper. But when you have nothing or you've been through a really desperate time, or I also think when people are faced with, say, older people are faced with downsizing, what I see all the time is when people are fearful, they hold tighter, right? And the Depression was an era of fear, and it was really emblazoned in their minds. And it's not something that they forget, right? All my grandparents were very careful with things because of that. But I think you also see people doing that when they have some fear that maybe they were poor and now they have money, right? And so they're thinking, well, my gosh, when I was poor, I couldn't afford to buy that, and I have it now, so I really shouldn't get rid of it because that would be frivolous. So I think it's just a mindset shift for people to really think carefully about, okay, is that rational? Do I really need to keep that? Do I want to keep that? Instead of just hanging on to everything because there's just a fear that, it could go away.
You were saying something now that really took my mind somewhere. I used to work with seniors for a long time, and that kind of opened my eyes to something. And I felt like it was a new awareness for me that up to a certain point in our lives, we accumulate things.
Mm-hmm.
And then there comes a time when we have to downsize and we have to get rid of a lot of things. And it was always so shocking for seniors to realize how many of their children didn't have any value in the stuff that they accumulated. So do you ever work in downsizing?
That's actually why I wrote the book. So everyone has clutter and they need to deal with it, right? But I have worked with several family members and other people, just general people, that have had a forced move, what I would call a forced move. A good example would be a grandparent that needs to go to assisted living, or maybe just to a senior apartment, right? They're going to leave the big house they've been in for 40 or 50 years. And it's really it's an eye-opening experience, because you're right, they've been collecting and saving all their lives, and now they're retired and they have the time to maybe utilize all these things that they've collected and gathered. But when it comes time to part with those things, they're hurt because their children don't want them. Generally, their children don't want them, right? The things that were special to them, like my husband's grandmother's casserole dish, it isn't special. My husband doesn't care. He wouldn't even know what it was. I kind of know what it is, but it's not special to either of us. And there are other things there's things of theirs that we would have said, oh, we'd love to have that because that is special. It has some sort of connected memory. So I think for people, when they do get older, my grandma used to do the funniest thing. She would come up and she would have a pad of sticky notes and she would give them to you. And when you would go visit her, she'd say, put a sticky on it, honey. And if she was a very prolific artist, and so when she died, there were sticky notes on the backs of a lot of things. And sometimes there was more than one. Because somebody was like, I'm just going to slap it on there. I see that other one, but who's going to know who really put it there first? But that was always the funny thing, because she was really trying. She was thinking, one day I'm not going to be here. And I want people to say what they want, so it doesn't just go anywhere, or someone doesn't just throw it away. But I think it's hard for people to be told, no, Mom, I don't want that tea service. No, Mom, I don't really want that's out of China. But I think it's important. The change and the shift there can be, what would you like? What is special of mine that you would like? And then they feel like they are leaving some piece of their family history to you. And it's kind of a win-win. My grandma and I used to go through her stuff all the time, and she would say, put your name on things. And I never wanted to, because I thought that was so weird that, like, you're going to die and I don't want to do that. But I finally did, because I realized it made my grandma really happy to know that, like, this China set was going to go to me, or that piece of art will go to me or my brother or whoever. So I think that's a good way for people to kind of break that down and help with that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So can you give an example of a time that you helped someone get rid of clutter because they were downsizing, or because they, for whatever reason they had to?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did you help them navigate that, especially when it's like, so many things that are cherished for whatever reason, because they went through depression, or because it was a sentimental value, an immigrant who. So what was the process that you used to help them?
So my husband's grandmother is the perfect example. She was an incredible entertainer, and so good that no one would invite them to their house because they were like, we can't measure up, right? And she had dishes and you name it. She had a Tupperware cabinet that was probably 4 feet wide, 2 feet deep, and 8 feet tall. And it was only filled with Tupperware, right? And I mean Tupperware, the nice stuff. And she probably had 8 to 12 pieces of each kind of Tupperware. So when she was ready to kind of move, downsize, she was moving to a senior apartment. It was a little kitchen, 1 bedroom, and she was moving from a 3-bedroom house. So they had downsized a little, but I said, okay, Granny, you used to live in a motorhome. So I know, you travel on the road. I know we can do this. I pulled out these rectangular Tupperwares, perfect for like a sandwich cut in half. And I said, okay, Granny, how many of these do you think that you need to keep in the apartment? Would 4 work? Well, I should have 8, but let's see what else there is. So the next thing I pull out, these little pie-shaped Tupperwares. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're the shape of a slice of pie, triangle. And I said, oh, okay, Granny, well, here's some pie Tupperwares. And she's like, well, I need those. And I said, oh, well, can't we put the pie slices in the square Tupperwares? Because you could put 2 kind of, back to back. Well, no, perfect for a slice of pie. So I had to, hold my breath a minute and go, okay, but let's look at this. We don't have a lot of space. So what we did was we would say, okay, we'll keep the 4 the square Tupperwares for sandwiches, right? We're going to take these 4 and we're going to put them in a box. And this is going to be the box of things that we'll get to keep if we have room. Is that fair? And she would say, well, I don't like it, but we'll try it. And that's usually my methodology with people. And you do have to be careful because, people get very sensitive and they can shut down a little bit when all their things are going away and there's such great change. That seems to be a good tactic though.
How about mental health? When you look at people coming from a very cluttered space to suddenly a system and something that works, how do you see in your experience and opinion, how does it influence their mental health to the positive?
Most of the people I've worked with have been pretty generally neat people. They do have a little clutter, but the improvement of being able to find things more quickly or not have to replace things because you can't locate it. And then the minute you buy it, you know how that works. You find the pair of scissors you couldn't find because you bought a new pair. And I think people just feel a little bit more sense of calm and like, I don't have to go searching everywhere for every little thing because I know where it is. So I see people feeling like they have less to manage. They know where their things are because they don't have so many things. And if they've taken time to develop systems, even just putting things in drawers and cabinets, they know right where to go when they want that item. So I think for most people, it's really a bit of a relief. And just that feeling of, when you're sitting on the couch looking at a mess and you're just tired and you're like, I don't have time, I'll clean that mess up tomorrow. It doesn't feel good looking at that mess. And I think people feel so much better when they sit in a space that feels nice and feels cozy and warm and not overwhelming. So I think in general, it's just a great mood lifter.
My question is, how do you convince people that they will feel better? Because it's like you said, they take offense to it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So how can you convince that person that if they did get rid of the 99 Tupperwares and only keep the 1, that they would eventually feel better about that?
That you've heard that old phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I have had to do a little tough love with some people. And I just tell people, if I'm here to help you, then I'm going to tell you what I think helps you, right? I'm not going to tell you something I don't think would serve you. And you have every right to not do it. But remember what our goal is, right? You're still going to have some people who are resistant. And I think you just have to expect that. But you have to have leeway for those things you're not sure of. I always encourage people to have the bin of the things they can't deal with, especially if there's been a recent death. I've had situations like that where there's been a recent death. You cannot get a widow to deal with their spouse's things a few months after their death. It's just too painful. And so then I enact something I call the memorabilia tub, which is basically just a giant bin that we put all those things in. And we try to put a goal on it of, hey, when do you think you can sort through this? Unless it's really recent, maybe they come back in a year. We went through this with my mother-in-law when my father-in-law died, and they moved off of a farm of 50 years. And I can't tell you what that was like. It's a lot. 50 years is a lot. And she just dealt with those tubs about a year ago. And that was 7 or 8 years ago that my father-in-law died. She just wasn't ready. She put him in a storage unit, and finally one day she was ready, and one of the grandkids offered to help her, and she went through, but she still made another 1 or 2 tubs out of those 7 or 8 that were for down the road later. And I think you just have to do the best you can to lead and give people a little leeway. You certainly don't ever want to be like, nope, can't keep that.
Yeah, I remember now, my little brother died at the age of 13, and my parents never ever got rid of his stuff.
Right.
And
I
so
think that's
eventually,
common.
yeah, I mean, it's been, more than 30 years now.
Yeah.
And my father just recently died 2 years ago. And at that point, we dealt with all 3 of theirs, mom, dad, and my little brother's stuff. It was because it was their child, their youngest child. They just couldn't.
Yeah, and I had a friend, a dear friend, who passed away, and I remember it vividly and with great pain. The day her daughter called me and said, "My mom's been reduced to a box in my office. Her life has been reduced to a banker's box." And that just broke my heart to think that, we live these rich, full lives, and in the end, that's what happens, right? But also, we don't hang on to that physical, but it was still so fresh and painful for her, and I think of that. But I also know personally for myself, I talk in my book about little ghosts. And little ghosts are those things that sit around and remind us, sometimes in a bad way, of the person we're missing. And I had so many little ghosts after my mom died. And one day I went, wait a minute, I don't even want these things. And I boxed them all up and mailed them to her friends and put a note in and said, my mom loved you so much. I know you always appreciated her jewelry, style, clothing, whatever it was. She would want you to have this. And I hope that you wear it with joy. For years after that, and I literally mean 5-6 years, I would get random texts out of the blue. I'm wearing Catherine's coat today. Loving it. Channeling Kath. And they do a selfie with the dress they have, picture of the bracelet. And that made me so happy, because seeing the stuff in my house just made me sad, right? Was just sitting there doing nothing. But knowing that it was out in the world with people who loved her and they were enjoying that and they were thinking of her, kind of got rid of that whole reduced to a box thing, right? She was still living on, making people happy. And I love that. I think that's a great, great solution for things like that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it's a wonderful idea, actually. It's
that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Franny. My husband, he has a dog who died, and it was his favorite dog of all time 8 years ago. And he still has a shrine to the dog.
Mm-hmm.
He still has his water dish. He still has his collar. He still has his brush. I'm not allowed to brush my dog with a brush. And so a while back I said and my brother made him this bigger than life-size painting of the dog, which is hanging by his bedside. And I said to him, well, we need to do something that is not all these things around him, but one thing. So the vet gave us a paw print.
Yes.
And I said, do something with a paw print, frame it, or
shadow
get a
box.
tattoo or whatever. Yes.
Yeah, I think people keep things out of the fear of being disloyal, right? Mm-hmm. I think they feel like, my grandma's been gone a long time. I finally gave her tea service away because I was like, I do not want this. I do not need this. And I don't even enjoy it. And I thought, oh, she's just rolling over in her urn, poof, her ashes are all fluffed up. But really, it went to someone who was so excited to get it that made a difference. And then a lot of her small things that I could never really bring myself to get rid of, she was a seamstress, I made them into a shadow box, and they hang in art as art in my house. And I see that. It's not like they're back in the back of a cabinet or a drawer. I see that, and then I smile and think of her. So I think there's a way to do those things so that they make a nice memory, but I also understand why people have a hard time parting with them. They do feel disloyal.
So tell us a little bit more about your book. What do you get into? Like, is there helpful hints, or do you tell us about how to run systems, or what? Tell us a little bit more about your book that just came out.
Sure. So the book, after helping so many people declutter for so many years, oh, I had the nightmares of like what might leave my child, right? And we had inherited so much stuff. We have one mom left between my husband and I. And so, grandparents, parents, all the stuff sort of landed at our house. And I finally looked at my husband and said, our daughter's going to go to college in a year. We live in this huge house. We're paying a gardener, a housekeeper, a maintenance guy, blah, blah, all the things, huge taxes, big mortgage, power bills. And we live on one level of this large home, right? We live in less than 1,500 square feet of a 3,400 square foot home. And we had owned some property that we were talking about building on. And I said, what if we just did something really crazy? Because we build giant, big, huge houses. I said, what if we just built like 1,000 square foot house? And my husband looked at me like I had been drinking for breakfast. And then he thought about it and he goes, yeah, whatever. If we don't like it, we can move, because that's what we do. So we decided after our daughter went to college, we would build this 1,131 square foot house. It's uber deluxe. There's a thing called a jewel box house, but it's little, and it had a bedroom in case our daughter came home, and we have everything we need in this house, and it is fantastic. That's what kind of came out of all this decluttering for people. But what we did was we went through the whole process ourselves that I had been doing with all these people. And I knew I had all these little ghosts and all these things in the house. So a year ahead of time, I started going through the house room by room. I did one room at a time, and I created this system sort of unknowingly that I call the 4Gs. And it's just about, like, some of it you give away, some of it you get to keep. Some of it is the guilt stuff. It's the things your grandma gave you or your mom gave you. And some of it is the go ahead, just put it in storage, but don't get carried away, right? So it's a process about how do you sort each item as you go room by room through the house. And especially if you're going to move to a smaller place. I do talk about living smaller in my book. There's a full chapter on that because I'm such an advocate of it. It's less financial energy, less emotional energy, more free time. There's so many benefits to it, and just less stuff. But we probably gave away 80% of everything we owned. Sold, gave away, donated, out the door, just ruthless, and moved into a small house. So that's really what the book is about. It's helping people look at whether you're decluttering one space or whether you're really looking at doing something like we did, where you're decluttering for a big resizing. And I think for some people, resizing isn't maybe being smaller. Many people, as a builder, oh my gosh, I could tell you stories. People want to build these huge houses. Most of my clients' master suites are larger than my house, and I am not exaggerating. We were standing in a house, and I said, this bedroom, closet, sitting room, bathroom is bigger than our house. And my husband was like, you're right, it is, which is kind of weird. But I just think there's so many people with these huge houses and no space. And we meet them all the time, and they say, well, we just need, a couple hundred more square feet, and then we won't feel so cramped. I know. How about you go through the closets and you clean out some of those rooms? And you make some of the rooms multi-purpose. You would then have so much more space, and you wouldn't even have to move. People are not wired that way, though. I'm sure you know. And so they just want to build a bigger house. But I say, just resize where you're at.
Marina, it's kind of like what we've learned through RTT, hypnotherapy, that not enough, that mentality of not enough. right? And
Yeah.
the not enough can mean not enough floor space, not enough stuff, not enough anything. It
There's
could
a
be
huge thread between that and overeating as well. Like this, what if there's not enough? What if I cannot get that tomorrow? So I see
And
this all the
I
time.
totally resonate with that. And I see
Yeah.
that in people
Yeah.
I'm working with. What if I can't replace this? What if I
Right.
give this away and I don't have the money to buy it again? And it's really permeates so many topics, you know, overeating. There's so many things that, you know, compulsive shopping, just not
There's,
get, you know.
there's also in something that I see quite frequently, there's this procrastination element. Well, I cannot do this because I haven't sorted out my paperwork, and it's just procrastinating and not doing the one because I haven't done the other one, and not getting to the other one, and always using that as an excuse.
And that's exactly what I call that. That's just an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
And that people don't, I think people don't realize that. I mean, I'm not a therapist, but you start seeing patterns so quickly with people. And it's like, okay, they're avoiding doing that by saying, oh, I can't do this until I do that. Well, I need to buy these bins before I clean out that room because I need the bins. No, you don't. You just need a garbage bag and maybe some boxes. But people, they set up these barriers to success, I think, in some ways to prevent them having to dive in and do the hard work, because let's be honest, can be emotional work for people. And for some people, it's aggravating. They're either upset because they spent good money on something and now they don't need it and they've wasted. I hear people say that all the time. Well, I bought this and I can't get my money back, so I'm just going to keep it. Okay, well, how is that serving you? Well, what do you mean? I think it just takes time for people to hear that a few times and they start to come around. As long as someone isn't bossing them, and telling them, you can't keep this, you can't have that. The minute that starts, it gets pretty ugly.
I know.
So, Judy, do you ever have people telling you, well, it's easy for you to say, you were probably born that way. You were probably born an organizer. I'm, just learning this for the first time. Do you ever have that kind of an excuse going on?
I'm sure I'll hear that. I've not heard that yet, but I hear people all the time say things like that. Well, I'm just not naturally organized, right? Or I don't think that way. And we all think differently and we all have different skill sets. But I think for a lot of people, that's a convenient excuse. But it's true. I probably do like that process more than most people do. But for me, pulling weeds, kill me now. I don't want to garden. Don't make me garden. And other people, right? There's different strokes. But I think the thing that people often will say to me is, well, you haven't been old and had to give everything in your life away, right? And they're right. I haven't, but I have also willingly assessed my life and possessions and said, I don't want to do this later. I want to have a little more freedom now. And yeah, I'm still going to have to do that at some point, but I've done a lot of it now. And that feels really good to me. So I at least have a little counter to it, but I'm waiting for someone to say, well, you were just born that way.
Yeah.
I think we learn so many things from our parents as well. And I mean, like I said in the beginning, growing up with somebody doing everything for you, you kind of miss a step. It's like a baby not crawling. You miss a step, and so it takes a lot more effort than to relearn things that you missed when you were a child.
And I think we have some people that are really sentimental about things, and we have some people that are really sentimental about people. My grandma was very sentimental about belongings that were her parents or whatever, right? My mom was sentimental about people. She didn't like clutter. And she would, my grandma I would go to visit for the summer and come home with a box of goodies, usually old teacups or something like that. And my mom I could just see her rolling her eyes and I could see the steam coming out of her ears being mad at her mom for sending me home with this. And she would say, well, we'll just put it in this cupboard. And then when I would go to look for it, it would be gone. I mean, she had it on the Goodwill truck faster than I could even figure out it was gone. But she wasn't sentimental about any particular item, more so people. I have a mix of both. I am very sentimental about people, and I am sentimental about some items. And I think there's an influence that you get, just like if things are done for you, from whatever your internal family structure looks like. And I think that shapes people a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, the sentimental thing is a very big thing. And my parents went to Norway when I was a child, and my dad came home with this troll about this size. And you will not believe it, but a few years ago, like 2014, we went to visit them in South Africa, and I found this troll in a closet just in the back. And I went to my dad, I picked it up, I cleaned it out. I said to him, I want this thing. And he said, absolutely not. No, you're not having this. I said, but it was such a big part of my childhood. We have so many stories about this troll. Well, we came home and my husband bought me one, an exact replica imported from Norway. And this big thing is sitting in my living room today. And do you know how many people ask me, why do you have this thing? Do you have Norwegian roots? No, I don't. Not at all.
Well, you know, there's just things that are special and representative to us from our childhood, or from like an uncle or a grandparent, or like I have those things too. They just, you know, I can't see a rose bush without thinking of my grandma because she had a million roses. You know, just things like that that we attach to. That doesn't surprise me at all. That, you know, I have some things like that too. And people say to me, why would you want that? My in-laws had this black ceramic bowl, like a cow bull. It was just a little figurine. He was about, you know, he's pretty good sized. And every time it would come up, when all the family was together, when the kids were all adults, was, well, when I get the bowl, no, I get the bowl. No, I get the bowl. There were 3 of them, 2 girls and a boy, and they would just start fighting about the bowl. And my mother-in-law actually drew up their wills to say, no one gets anything. Everything will be sold and split 3 ways. There will be no fighting over the bowl or anything else. And I thought that was kind of harsh, but it was actually kind of smart. But obviously they didn't both pass at the same time. My mother-in-law survived her husband, and no one wanted the bull. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, great. Battle Royale. Get ready. The bullfight is going to begin. And I said to my husband, if you want that damn bull, you better start in. And he's like, I don't want that stupid thing. And so then I offered it to the sisters, and no, don't want it.
Interesting.
Believe it, because it had been the topic of family dinners for 15 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So everyone has their representative thing.
Well, you were talking earlier about gardening. I love gardening. And you know what? I planted strawberries. Why? It's one of the memories I have doing with my grandma, picking strawberries.
Me too. Yeah. I don't even really love strawberries, but I pick them with her every summer. And so I have a special thing for strawberries. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Interesting. So we know about your book. Where can we buy your book?
The book is available on Amazon, and it's on my website, judygranlee-gates.com. And there's links around the world. If you're in Canada, if you're in Australia, there's an Amazon link for it. The book looks like this. The lilacs, which remind me of my grandma.
So Judy Granlee-Gates.
Is
it is the hyphen in there?
No, there's no hyphen.
Okay,
no hyphen in the on the website. It's just Granlee-Gates, right?
And that's the best way that people can get hold of you?
Yes, my website has contact form. I have a newsletter that I send out just once a month. Just has some helpful tips and some product highlights and things like that. And you can sign up to be on the newsletter. There's a lot of just information I'll be posting there about just some different decluttering tips and things that I've been putting together, some articles that have featured some of my input. So a good resource for people. I'm still building that up a little bit, but there's already some stuff there you can look at.
Excellent.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because you know, as I sit in this room, the clutter is in front of me, not behind. So it's like I look around and I go, yeah, I could get rid of that pile. I could get rid of that pile. My nemesis is books. So Yeah.
Books and clothing. That's the two things that people tell me, books and clothing. And books are hard because I have a lot of books too. I love a nice, like up at the top of the room around up high, about 18 inches down from the ceiling. I love a high bookcase, just a high shelf all the way around the top of the room. I have an office at home that has all my books up high. They're out of the way, but I can still get to them. And of course, I like mine in Roy G. Biv color order because I'm a weirdo. I love everything in Roy G. Biv. You know what that is? The color spectrum.
Yeah.
My husband calls it Belle Biv DeVoe. I'm like, okay, whatever, babe. But it's so nice to have books. I mean, people love them. So I always say invest in a good system for organizing your books, like floor to ceiling built-in bookcases that take up the entire space and that are designed to fit your books. Maybe you have bigger books, maybe you have smaller books. You know, those are the best way to take up the least space. But books are a really hard one for people.
In our industry, there's always professional development. There's always new books. And you know what? What I'm guilty of, whenever we get a new guest, I buy their book. So every week I have a new book.
You know, depending, like right now I have them in Roy G. Biv order, but I do them by size too, which is really crazy. But
my bookshelf will drive you crazy.
Oh, nah. I mean, I like a bookshelf anyway, but one way to really maximize space for books for people who have a lot is to sort them. And this can drive people crazy because everyone has their own idea of how they want their books sorted, is to sort them by size. Because then the 9-inch books are on one shelf, all the 10-inch books are on one shelf. You would be amazed. You could get rid of 2 bookcases and consolidate everything into one bookcase if you sort by size. So if space is really an issue, size can be the way to do it. But there's a lot of creative ways to store books and use them around your house. Put a stack of books up and put a plant on top of it. You have a lot of plants behind you, Fran. Just, you know, some of your books that you don't read as often, put something under there to protect it. But like coffee table books look very pretty with something on top of them. And they add a little interest in your house. So there's lots of places to stash books.
And clothing?
Oh, clothing is the nemesis. That was the number one thing. I surveyed a lot of people. And the number one thing, especially with women, they said they had, and men too, but mostly women, they had the hardest time getting rid of was beautiful clothing that was too small. And I can relate. There's a story in the book about a very expensive jacket that I bought that I kept until about 8 years ago. And I bought
hoping to shrink back into it, right?
Yeah, because I'm going to shrink. And, you know, we all get a little bigger as we get older and your body changes. And I couldn't get one leg into some of the pants I used to wear. And I'm not a person who tends to keep clothes. I'm pretty good about that. But I asked people why. So why? What is the problem? Well, I paid a lot of money for it, or it represented a time when I felt really good about myself. And this was this jacket I had. I thought I was the cat's pajamas in this jacket. I mean, I could have won any competition wearing this jacket because I just felt like a superstar in it. Didn't matter. And so I kept it because of that. Like, it made me feel fantastic. And I think that a lot of people do that. But then there's also the money component. You know, especially if it was expensive. A lot of people told me they had tons of clothes with tags on them that they had never worn. I am also guilty of that. And they just kept thinking, I'll fit into them one day. And I said, so think about it this way. You walk into your closet and you have, you know, 4 walls of clothes and half of it doesn't fit you. So then you spend every morning trying things on or grabbing things down to go, oh, that doesn't fit. That's too tight. I don't like the way that looks on me. So you're wasting a bunch of time and you're getting frustrated on a daily basis because half the clothes you own, generally, you aren't wearing. And so if it itches, if the tag is wonky, if it rides up, if it just doesn't fit right, I don't care if you just bought it. I don't care. Really be honest and get rid of it. You will find, I now have a 5 foot by 5 foot, or I don't know what that is in Canadian. I'm not good with metrics. A primary closet. It's tiny and I share it with my husband. And let me tell you, I don't have any problem getting dressed in the morning anymore because I don't have that many options. I mean, I have a lot, but I have a third of what I used to have because I just was like, these things itch. I don't like this color. That thing bugs me. And I just gave them to an organization that has a domestic violence shelter for women that are, fleeing a domestic violence situation. They've left with nothing. They need clothes to work. They need clothes to live. And I just give it all to them. And I love doing that. Or a local charity thrift shop that supports our food bank, so I can feel good about that. But I just tell people, don't torture yourself. That's the thing about clothes. I think clothes are really torture if they don't fit you.
Oh, absolutely amazing advice today, Judy. Thank you so much. It was very enlightening and fantastic. Gave me a lot of things to think about. So thank you for being here. And again, you can contact Judy at her website, judygranlee-gates.com, and buy her book on Amazon. Beautiful book. Can you just put that up again for us to see, Judy?
Yes, there it is.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful.
It is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
I can smell those flowers.
I know. It's having a cozy home. You've got the coffee, the flowers, the whole 9 yards.
Fantastic. Now, thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you so much
Judy.
for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I enjoy sharing what I know about decluttering and living smaller. And I hope that, people pick up what works for them. It's all, that's really all it's about.
Beautiful.
It's taking that first step, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for all our viewers again who turned in, and first-time viewers. It's always a pleasure to have you here. If you enjoyed hearing us today, please subscribe. The button is below you. And we will see you next time.